Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our webinar tonight on the proposed changes to CAP for 2023. And also tonight, we're going to just deal with the BPS for 2022. So a summary, Terry will go through a summary for 2022, and the main session then is to go through the proposed changes. We're not 100%, but it'll be a good guide on what's going to happen in 2023. And just on the outset, I suppose most of us here tonight that will be speaking have been here since the McSharry proposals came out 30 years ago, and we've gone through 3 different versions of the CAP, and I suppose the BIS is starting next year is going to be the 4th version. So it's always been changed, technology has moved on, so and I suppose in fairness, farmers have embraced that change over the years. So first of all, tonight, I'm going to bring in Terry Carroll, who is a dry stock advisor in Kilkenny here. Then we'll have James McDonald, who's a specialist in this area in Oak Park and Carlow. And then John Maguire, based in Mullavat, who is a dairy advisor in East Waterford, will go through the new greening, which is he'll talk about that later. Okay, so just to keep the thing interactive, I will ask any questions as we go through the night. Would you put it down in the Q&A at the end of your screens? There's a Q&A box. So would you put any questions you have, and we'll deal with them as we go through this evening. So we'll kick it off straight away. Terry, with you. Thanks, Terry.
Thanks, Richie. Yeah, and as I said, I suppose maybe the main part of tonight might be looking at what's going to happen in 2023 with the way the entitlements are going to change. But first of all, the important year is the year we're in. So look, I suppose last year we didn't get to meet too many farmers on account of the COVID regulations, and even the year before it sort of kicked in early on in the campaign. So while we completed a lot of them over the phone the last maybe 2 years, there'll be an element of that and maybe actual appointments this year. So I'll go through that. So the BPS 2022 should be open. I think it's around the 16th of February that may be officially launched. So from mid-February onwards, it'll be open for farmers to come into us, and we can submit applications, and it's open until midnight on May the 16th. That's a Monday night. Also, the National Reserve and Young Farmer Scheme will follow the same time frame from February to the 16th of May. And just a note, I've in the comments there, no off-farm income limit. With the National Reserve, the last number of years, there was an off-farm income limit of 40,000 in either of 2 previous years. That off-farm income limit has been lifted now for this year. So that can free up some people there where they might be eligible to get new entitlements on blank or naked land. The Young Farmer Scheme there, which was a top-up on existing entitlements, there wasn't any off-farm income limit there. That used to come to about 65 or 67 euro extra on up to 90 entitlements if you had those. All applications are online, as they have been for a number of years, and it's a system that works very, very well, and it leads for less mistakes than what we would see here in Teagasc. And obviously a list of the land parcels and the maps from 2021 will be posted out to all farmers very soon, possibly around that middle of February date. So I suppose what we'd say every year to people, and I'm only repeating myself here maybe, is check the maps carefully, because it's all based on the maps that you're sent out, so that the boundaries are correct. Now, look, in most cases they will be correct, but check them. And I suppose the second thing there, are there any more or less exclusion areas on your farm? Like, have things changed from last year, which is very easy to happen. Maybe a site gone, or maybe a bit of scrubway or whatever that you have cleaned up. So just watch that, and I mean, make notes of that, and be prepared to tell us that when you're coming in to maybe complete the form with us or over the phone. Maybe extra roadways or buildings that have happened since last year. Very easy for that to have happened, and you're gone used to it now since last year, and maybe that could be forgotten as a little change to be made to the map. I suppose the other thing, and we have seen it for a lot of years there, occasionally it happens. I'm not really sure why it happens, but anyway, are all parcels shown and listed? And I suppose especially those forestry parcels, sometimes they may not be on your area aid form, And while you might say, look, it don't really matter for stocking rate or anything like that there, well, you could be drawing entitlements on it. And regardless if you're drawing premium on it, they need to be listed. So just be careful with that one. The other big thing there, herd number. I mean, the herd number is king, and everything that must be correct, and everything else follows herd number. So are there any recent or pending changes to the name of the herd number? Why I'm saying pending there is you could have sent in an ER1 application to the DVO next week, for example, to get a herd number changed to maybe a son or daughter being added onto your herd number. If you come into us in a 3 weeks time, there might be no change have been made to that herd number, but the fact that you have looked to make a change, that's what's going to be happening. So if something like that is in the pipeline, we absolutely need to know, because that's where we have to, the Area 8 must follow that, would be new herd number that will be coming to you. So what's just adding names or removing names or transferring a herd number. Also, people may be creating partnerships or forming a company, or just a simple giant herd number. So just, that's will absolutely give problems if we don't have that fully correct. So just be very, very careful. The herd number must exactly match the Area 8 form, which must exactly match the entitlement. So as I said, the bottom line there is, the entitlements must be the exact same name or title as that herd number. So that's absolutely paramount, always has been, but just we need to watch that every year. Leasing of entitlements, a lot of that occurs both leasing out and leasing in. And what we say there is check maybe a previous lease of entitlements if it's expired. So you may have leased entitlements out to someone there, maybe a lease for 3 or 4 or 5 years or whatever. That lease would have been up in the correspondence for whatever year he created it, but it could by chance just have ended the end of 21. And, just to be careful that you're aware of that. And when we look in 2022, we won't see anything about those entitlements. We have to go in and look under the 2021 correspondence, and it'll show up there very clearly about the expired lease. So just, it's something that can, just fall between the cracks there if it's not watched carefully. So just be alert to that. And the other golden rule, and it always has been, that entitlement trading must be done by the close of business on the final day, which is the 16th of May. And while an Area 8 form, as we'll come to in a minute, can go in a little bit after that, no entitlement trading happens. So a minute past midnight, even on the 16th, that form is ineligible. So just be very, very careful with that. I suppose other checks there that we'll be making pre-submitting the BPS or the Basic Payment Scheme form is, Young Farmer Scheme. If someone has been in that there, it's a 5-year program. So make sure that box is ticked on the front. Occasionally, we might see that box not appearing. So we'd have to adjust and amend the Area 8 form and put in a note if it wasn't appearing, because the responsibility is over with the applicant. Is the ANC or area of natural constraint, is that box ticked, where people have disadvantaged land? Look, I don't know, everyone does things different. My golden rule is I tick that in every form I do, because you can't be wrong if you've it ticked. Whereas if you're starting to ask people, have you disadvantaged land or not, that's a recipe for missing. So absolutely tick it. There's no penalty, even if you never had ANC land. Then just to check parcels, are they correctly, if you have land to add on, make sure you tell us and we add it on, or delete it, or the parcels to be subdivided. So all those things, need to be done and done correctly. But I mean, you can come back and do them again if you know there's something. If you come in February and we miss something, or you get land after that, we'll come to that in a second. That can be done subsequently before a certain date. Watch with all gloss and read parcels. Again, just this could come to fruition where someone might be maybe going to rent out some land or lease out some land to someone. Just be careful. Like most people have rolled on in gloss. Gloss is there to the end of 2022. So if you happen to maybe taking your eye off the ball, decided you're going to rent out a parcel or some parcels and one of them happen to be in gloss, that'll wreck your gloss. So I mean, that cannot be done. You must stay with that for this year, gloss or read parcels, because you've committed to that program for another year, and it start going back on you all the years if you don't fulfill holding on to it. Just a quick note to tillage farmers, and tillage farmers know all these things over the years. So the 2-crop rule there, if you have more than 10 hectares of arable ground, or the 3-crop rule if you have more than 30 hectares. 2-crop rule meaning the main crop within that can't be more than 75% of the total arable, and the 3-crop rule implies that the main and second crop can't be more than 95% of the total arable. So that's going to be there again for 22. Grass sown after tillage in the last 5 years is deemed eligible as a crop. If an applicant has more than 80% grass, he or she then doesn't have to abide by that 2 or 3 crop rule. And in that grass counting, that grass that could be eligible as a crop can count as actual grass there in that line. EFAs, or ecological focus areas, must be over 5% of the arable area. We probably aim for having it near to 7% there, just for safety when we're doing that. And the other thing then, the protein and straw incorporation schemes, they will be present this year again. The protein scheme ended up around €300 a hectare for the protein crops, and the straw incorporation scheme there anywhere from 5 to 40 hectares, and it was paying €150 for after oilseed rape and 250 for cereal stubble there being spread out and incorporated. I suppose, look, the final slide then, Richie, there, just the Chagas campaign, appointment slots from our side there, we'll be sending out slots to farmers probably from about the 20th of February. The girls in the office will send out an appointment. And that then appointment can be done either by coming into the office, or if both the applicant and ourselves are happy that can be done over the phone, we can do it that way. And it has worked fine. Probably the more complicated ones or where there are changes, we would need to meet up. And just then on the amendments, then you can, if you come in May or in February and you're thinking there's a bit of land you're watching, you can amend the form as often as you like there up to the end of May. There's no problem doing that there. So don't be worrying about that. So look, I've written down there at the end, your most important form. Look, I think every form is a hugely important form because there's probably plenty of money writing on it. But I mean, without the Area 8 form, there's probably no other form matters because you're probably ineligible for everything else. So that's why I'm saying it's your most important form. So I'll leave it at that, Richie.
Okay, Terry, and just when James is getting ready there, there's a few questions coming in. The new LIPIS numbers in Kilkenny, is there new LIPIS numbers in Kilkenny? Have they been remapped?
Yeah, they've been in a number of counties there up to last year, and they're coming to another tranche of counties, and I think by next year they'll have them in all the counties. So look, it's nothing for the farmer to worry about. It's just a longer code to it. There's an extra couple of digits in it. We're not expecting any problems with it, but don't be surprised if you think, Janie, they've all the numbers wrong. They're gone longer. That's the new system being brought in by the department, and there's more accurate maps backing up. So nothing to worry about.
And another question, I bought 15.4 acres with no entitlements. Can I apply to the National Reserve for an entitlement allocation? I am 62 years old.
Yeah, we might deal with that at the end there. Look, normally those schemes there, the National Reserve there, they have age limits there for the National Reserve is under 40, or for National Reserve under 40, and the Young Farmer Scheme there, they have an age and limit as well. So what I might do is come back to that, not to complicate at this stage, Richie. I'll come back to that towards the end, and we might bring James in on it as well. Okay,
just a question there about this has been recorded. This webinar has been recorded and it will be available on our Twitter, Facebook and YouTube pages. So the Kilkenny Wharf or Wharf Kilkenny Chagas pages, Twitter, Facebook in the next week. So if anybody wants to watch this, that's another question. So James, the new proposals for 2023?
Thanks, Richie. Hopefully you'll be able to follow it because I suppose it's a full state of new schemes. So I'll try and go through it as simply as I can over the next 10 to 15 minutes, and sure you can ask questions afterwards. So our starting point, just to explain, you'll see the word CSP around a lot, and CSP means CAP strategic plan. So we're used to seeing the word CAP. So CSP is this CAP strategic plan. There's 9 different objectives around the policy. I'm not going to go through them, but I suppose it's setting out a policy to achieve something for farmers, the citizens of the EU and climate. So I'll just leave it at that. If you want to read the document, it's on the Department of Agriculture website. There's 528 pages in it. So where are we now at the moment and where are we going to? So I'm going to start with where we are at the moment. So if we look at the 2022 direct payment and that pot of money, how was it divided up? That Terry has gone through the application form as to how you apply for it. So currently, 70% of the payment that you get in October and December is made up from the basic payment entitlement. 30% of it is greening. Now, I suppose when you look at your payment, you'll see a 44% top up. So if you add 44% to 70, you get to 100. Convergence started to take place in 2015, and by 2019, the minimum value that all entitlements had reached was 110 euros. So that's this 60% figure, okay? We've heard about a cap on entitlements. There's currently a cap there. It's limited to 150,000, so nobody is getting a payment of basic payment entitlements above that figure at the minute, and they can get their greening on top of it, which brings you up to, I think, 175 or a figure like that. So there's very few farmers impacted by this cap. There's also the straw incorporation measure that Terry mentioned, and a protein payment. So these are all part of the Pillar 1 pot. If you're not sure what your entitlements are currently for 2022, they're similar to 2021. The statements are to issue in the near future. So you will get a text message stating that entitlement statements are up on your ag food account. So if you get that and you're wondering what it is, well, that's what the text message is about. So you can log in and check. Okay. So there's a little bit of new terminology that we'll have to get used to in the new cap. So the first one is BIS. So BISS is the Basic Income Support Scheme. So that replaces the Basic Payment Scheme. So we'll have BISS entitlements to replace the Basic Payment Scheme entitlements. We'll also have a CRIS. So that stands for Complementary Redistributive Income Support Scheme. Okay, so that's front loading. So we're talking about an extra payment on the first 30 hectares. Then we've got an eco scheme. So eco scheme partially replaces greening. Some of the greening measures that we have are going into conditionality, and more of them are appearing in an eco scheme. And John is going to talk about those in a little bit. And then Terry mentioned a national reserve. There'll be one of those again. And there'll also be a young farmer scheme. But the young farmer scheme has a new definition, and it's called Complementary Income Support for Young Farmers. Okay, so I'll come back to those over the next 10 minutes. Sorry. Okay, so if we look at CRIS, so it's a front-loading payment. Sorry, no. Oh yeah, sorry, skip the slide. So for Pillar 1 in the future, from 2023 to 2027, the pot is divided up a little bit differently. So we have 3% will be taken and will be used to fund young farmers through the new young farmer scheme. We'll have 10% going to front loading this CRIS scheme. 25% of it will go to the eco schemes that John will talk about. And then the remainder kind of is sitting in a pot with BIS. The cap that I mentioned that's currently there at 150,000 on basic payment entitlements will drop to 60,000, okay? And in this category, there's only 200 affected. So the chances are of one even being on this call would be fairly slim. BIS will continue to converge. So we're at 60% in basic payment. We'll get to 85% under the new cap reform. And we'll reach this 85% by 2026, even though the cap reform will last till 2027. So the last 2 years of it, we may have a similar payment. Some of this BIS money, 3% of it, of this pot will end up in the National Reserve to fund new entrants to farmers that don't have entitlements. And then we have a continuation of the straw incorporation measure and the protein payments. And I think there might be a little bit more money diverted to those two schemes so that more land can be put into those crops. Okay. So then if we look at the CRIS or the front loading, so what's happening here is it's a mandatory in this current round in this cap. It was voluntary and wasn't applied for in the 2015 to 2019 round or this current round. So what's happening is they're taking 10% off every entitlement and they're giving it back on the first 30 hectares. So if you're farming 60 hectares, you'll only get this payment on the first 30. And it's estimated that it'll be somewhere around the 44 euros. So if you have 30 by 44, it gives you 1,320 euros. So the payment will be around that, give or take a few euros. These figures are subject to rounding. And you do not need entitlements to get this payment. It's based on eligible hectares that you have on your application form. So if you have 20 hectares on your farm, but you only have 10 entitlements, you'll get the crisp payment on all 20. Okay. If we look at the eco scheme, just a little bit of background on it, John will go into more detail. I mentioned 25% of this pot essentially replaces greening. The payment will be somewhere between 63 and 77 euros. It's expected that in the first 2 years of it, not everybody might apply for it. And if they don't, the hectares that are applied for on the eco scheme, they'll divide the hectares into the pot of money. So the payment may be as high as 77 euros. But over time, it'll go down to 63. The Irish government has in the agreement that unspent money is retained in the country for the first 2 years. So there's a learning phase to it. Okay. This payment is also based on an eligible hectare. So it's not based on entitlements. So you could have, back to your 20 hectare farm with 10 entitlements, you could claim your eco payment on all your 20 hectares, even though you only have entitlements for 10. John will mention that there's 10 options in the proposal and you can choose 2. Okay, these have been widely mentioned and published in the press, so you're probably well aware of these measures. Then if we look at convergence, well, we currently have a net unit value on your entitlement statement, and what will happen is those sets of entitlements will continue to converge towards an average figure. The minimum point, as I mentioned already, is 85% of the average. Where people are capped or higher or have higher values, they will fund this convergence for the people that are converging upwards. Okay, so there's a cost to converging upwards, and capping, and the higher people with the higher values will fund that. As regards what your entitlements will look like, the Department of Agriculture are currently developing a calculator. It's nearly ready to go, so hopefully it will appear on their website in the near future. And they'll probably do, press releases, and if you keep an eye on the press, you'll probably see about it. So all you have to do is log on to their website, put in your figures, and you'll see how it will affect you. So just to note, people are wondering about reference years, and that there's no reference years in this proposal. So the existing sets of entitlements that you have will just continue to converge towards the average. And there'll be no entitlements expiring, like everybody's entitlements expired on the 31st of December 2014, and they generated a new set of entitlements on the 1st of January 2015. That's not happening this time. So just to look at some payments that people have, I'm just picking 3 categories because they're probably easier to do. The figures are fairly sound. So we've got the minimum that I mentioned already. So with convergence, the minimum payment is 110 euros per hectare. If you add 44% to that, you get 48 euros. So that's your greening payment. So the total minimum payment that people are getting got in 21 and will get in 22 is 158 euros per hectare. The average figure that's there at the moment, if you got entitlements from the National Reserve a couple of years ago, you'll see that they're now worth 179 euros or 178 euros 99, figure like that. Add on your greening of 79 euros, you're getting a payment of 258. And under the last round, nobody could be paid more than 700 euros when you looked at the basic payment and greening together. And due to different cuts and things that have happened over the last couple of years, that max payment is now 472 euros per entitlement. When you add on the greening onto it, this 44% top up, those people are now receiving 680 euros per entitlement. So they're the current minimum, average, and maximum figures that we have. So I'm now going to look at what happens to those as we move forward. So as I mentioned already, we have no reference years. The number of entitlements you have stay the same. The values will change. The average payments will be similar, as we'll see in a second, and transfers of entitlements are still possible. So if we look now to the future payments, so this is what's in the draft CSP that the Department of Agriculture lodged to Europe. So we've got this BIS payment that I mentioned. So the minimum payment will be, it's expected to be around 145 euros. So that's this 85% that we're achieving. The CRIS is a fixed figure of around 44 euros. We'll get our eco scheme payment, I mentioned, between 63 and 77. So let's stick with the lower figure. So you're now achieving 252 euros. So that's the minimum payment that people on this level will achieve by 2026. Okay, so we're converging upwards. So this figure is getting bigger over time. These two are staying the same. So by 2026, the people with the lower valued entitlements will achieve 252. The average figures will stay similar. So the BIS average will be 165. CRIS is adding 44 on the first 30 hectares. We have 63 euros of an eco scheme on all our hectares, bringing a total to 272. And if we look at the people with the maximum payment of 472 in the old scheme, this will now drop to about 285, the Department of Agriculture reckon. Now, it's not nailed down. It's in the proposal that when the calculations are done, they figure it to be 285. You get your CRIS and you get your eco scheme. So the max payment anyone can achieve per hectare would be 365. Okay. So now I'm going to just put these together to make it easier for you to do a comparison. So if we look at 22 versus 2026 payments, so we look at the minimum figures. So currently we're on the top side of the table. So BPS greening gives you a total of 158. And in the new system, we'll have BIS, CRIS, and ECO adding to 252. So from 22 to 26, there'll be a nice increase for those people that have a minimum payment. So they're going up the guts of 100 euros per hectare. If we look at the average figure, currently 179 plus 79 gives you 258, and that will change to 165, 44, and 63. So you go from 258 to 272. So maybe a slight rise, but overall very little change. If we look at the average farm size in Ireland of 34 hectares, you won't get the CRIS on all 34, you'll just get it on the 30. So that's the story with the average farmer. So they'll stay more or less the same. And if we look at the maximum payments, currently those people are getting 680, they'll drop to 365. So if you're a fairly ambitious farmer and you have been farming fairly intensively for the last 20 years, the chances are your entitlements are at worst average and at best somewhere above average. So if you're somewhere in this category, your payment may take some little bit of a cut. Okay, and how to do that, we'll have to wait for the Department of Agriculture calculator to see how that'll look. Okay, so I'm now just going to put up a slide on the active farmer. There's a proposal there where the active farmer is now going to be defined as those engaged in at least a minimum level of activity, a stocking rate of 0.15 livestock units per hectare. So the equivalent of a lowland ewe per hectare is what's in the proposal. So we just have to see how that works out. The department will know all those people that keep cattle through censuses and that they're active, and those people that are in, selling silage or growing cereals may need to supply documentation like receipts or payments for goods and services to show that they're showing a level of activity. So that's all in the proposal, and we'll just have to wait and see how that's going to be managed in the future. If we look at leasing entitlements and clawback, there's a proposal there to make changes to the way we trade entitlements at the moment. There's an awful lot of paperwork and administration around leasing entitlements. Lots of people lease out or lease in small portions of entitlements. And last year, I think the Department of Agriculture would have processed over 30,000 transfers of entitlements. So there's a good bit of administration burden there. And I suppose the farm organisations have been looking for to get entitlements into the hands of the more active farmers. So the department have put a proposal to Europe, and I'm just going to go through that fairly quickly. You may have read about it in the press. So they're talking about lifting the 20% clawback on the sale of entitlements without land for the years 23 and 24. So some people have been leasing out their entitlements year by year, didn't want to sell them because there's a clawback there. Now they may have an opportunity to sell them without clawback. So that's an incentive. They're also talking about implementing a new clawback percentage of 10% on entitlements per annum, where somebody is leasing out more than 80% of their entitlements for less than 5 years from 2023. So those farmers that are people that are maybe not farming are leasing out most of their entitlements on a year-by-year basis, or where there's a lease less than 5 years. So what they'll do is, if you're leasing out 10 entitlements, you lease out 10, the National Reserve gets 1, and 9 entitlements go to the other party. So it'll work like that. And if you do a long-term lease instead, you'll avoid that clawback. Okay. There will be allowances made for force majeure and inheritance cases in line with the normal rules. And the plan is to review this and sit down with all the farm organisations in 2024 to see, is it achieving anything? If it is, it might be tweaked, and if it's not, it may be dropped. So there'll be a review of that. Another thing that we get lots of questions on is around leasing land and entitlements together. And maybe there's lots of land leases that have expired at the end of the year, or due to expire in the next while, and you're wondering what you should do. And I suppose there's two sides to it, and we often are on both sides. We might be advising a lessor today and advising a leasee tomorrow. So from the lessor point of view, the person that owns the land and the entitlements and is not farming, is leasing them out, if they take a wait and see approach, which, you know, they could do, they may risk losing retirement relief if they decide to transfer on their land and entitlements to the next generation while they're alive. So if you're in that situation and you're wondering what to do, it's worth having a chat with both your advisor and your accountant, because you don't want to end up with some unintended consequence of losing out relief that maybe you might want to do. In terms of people that are renting in land and entitlements, it would be wise maybe if your business plan or what you're doing with the land is contributing to your profits, maybe to renew the lease. The entitlements and the land will continue on as we've known for the last number of years until 2028, but we don't know what happens after that. For those people that have been leasing out for the last 10 or 15 years, and maybe they have a next generation coming along, when the lease is up, they can complete a succession plan if they want, and they'll be able to pass over the land and the entitlements to the next generation. With a lot of the tax reliefs, there are active farmer conditions. And if the young person wants to go farming, well, then they need to watch the active farmer definition. So they'll have to show some activity, you know, animals in a herd number or whatever. And I'm hearing lots of very high rents are available. So if I had land, I'd be inclined to nearly rent it out with what rent I'm hearing is available. To those of you that are on the call that are farming on rented land, you'd really have to look at the price that's been paid. Can you afford to pay it? Are you generating a profit from it? You know, maybe you're lucky if you have land on a long-term lease and the rent is reasonable. But if you're in a renewal situation, you really do need to be careful and have a chat with your advisor. For those lessors, and you're trying to do a deal at the moment, and you're trying to maybe rent land for 7 to 10 years, we actually don't know what's going to happen in 2028. We're in 22 now, and we only have a proposal for 2023. So what's going to happen post 2028? Well, if entitlements are at 85% of the average by 2026, and negotiations start a year or two before the end of this new cap, I think they might be heading towards a national average figure. So if there's full flattening that happens in 2028, well, maybe we don't need entitlements at all. And maybe it's back to what happened in the early McSharry reforms, where if you have 10 acres of wheat, you'll get 10 payments. So it might be just back to whatever land is on your farm, you'll get a payment on that land. So just be careful if you're doing long leases. There might be no entitlements after 2028. So thanks for your attention. I'm not going to say any more. I'm sure there's lots of food for thought there. So back to you, Richie.
Perfect. That's great, James. That's a great insight to what's going to happen in 2023. Keep the questions coming. As I said, there's a Q&A box at the end of your screen, so keep the questions coming in. Just one question there. I'm going to put you just on the max. You have the max entitlements, and there's a figure thrown around there of 60,000 max. It was 150. Just explain that 60,000, James.
Okay, so the max payment is based on the BISS element of the new payments. So when we get our new statement of entitlements in 2023, all of those entitlements added up together, if they come to more than 60,000, there will be the cap will be applied. So every euro that you're due to get that's over this 60,000 limit, 85% of it will be taken from you. So it's not the entitlements are taken from you, they'll still sit there. You'll just be paid 60,000. And if your payment was, say, supposed to have been, we'll take a simple figure, let's say it's supposed to be 70,000. Well, you take 85% of the 10,000 that's above the 60, and you get 1,500 instead. So you'll end up with 6,000, 60,000, 61,500.
So you take off the current system, you take away the greening, and that's, you use that.
Yeah, so greening is separate.
Separate.
Okay. So in round figures, if somebody is currently getting a basic payment plus greening payment of 100,000, when all the calculation is done, the cap doesn't really affect them. But if their current payment is over 100,000, where you add basic payment and greening together, the cap will come into effect. There'll be a small cut on those people.
Okay, and there's a question, I know it's outside, so the money, the pot of money, you started there tonight, the pot of money is Pillar 1 money, but there's a question coming in about the new reps and GLAS scheme opening, which I know is Pillar 2, which you mentioned. So when will those new schemes start from Pillar 2, which is reps or GLAS or REAP?
Yeah, from my discussions with the department, it's most of my discussions with them are on Pillar 1. And as the basic payment scheme or the new BIS scheme in 2023, it's like a foundation scheme. Every other scheme hangs off it. So I think in order for a new GLAS scheme for the department in order to run it, you're putting in maps and you're claiming on LPIS numbers. So those numbers have to be cleared on the basic payment. So I think maybe that scheme mightn't open until the autumn of 2023, because it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. If you do the GLAS plan in early 23, but the basic payment application isn't completed, how do they check what land is there to work out your payment? So I think the department, Portlaoise and Johnson Cast are kind of in negotiations to try and figure that out at the minute. So I don't think the department could even give a definitive answer on that.
Okay, but it's
complicated. Yeah.
It's a different pot of money for what we're talking about tonight. Terry, is there any other questions?
Just a little bit in the land leasing there, Richie there, just I suppose clients there wondering if your lease is up now on land and are thinking of renewing that lease, are there any repercussions going forward, given that entitlements, as we know it, are changing come next year, and what sort of stream of income could they expect to receive for leasing out their entitlements going forward?
Yeah, that's a good question, Terry. Sometimes people ask me, the leasee wants to pay back the lessor the money, and is the greening included? And I'd ask, well, what's in the agreement? So if you're renewing a lease now and there's land and entitlements in it, well, we've got the BPS entitlement and we've got the BIS entitlement that you're going to have in the future. The CRIS and the eco schemes are separate payment. They're not hanging off a percentage of the new entitlements we'd have. So I would think the easiest way to do all this if you're negotiating a lease is, if the person is insistent that the entitlements have to go back, well, it's the BIS element of it that you pay back, and you work out some wording that goes into the lease that both people are happy about, and let the rent then balance up. So the other thing is, can you afford the rent? So and if that's too high, you just walk away from it. So,
and just maybe Richie, maybe we'll address, Michael had that question on the 15 acres with no entitlements and applying to the National Reserve for the entitlement allocation, and he's 62 years old. So I think you would up the conditions on a previous presentation too, was there. I have them there, and if you want to answer it, James, you're more qualified to answer it. So it's National Reserve more than the Young Farmer Scheme.
I'll have a go at it. So if you're 62 years of age, if you're only recently started farming, you may qualify under the new entrant category in the National Reserve. If you've been farming all your life, well then, you know, there's no category in the National Reserve for you. So the only way to get entitlements is to either buy them or go out and rent them.
Okay, and will we be paid on scrub land in 2023?
Okay, that's an interesting one. The department are telling us that, you know, the space for nature option that John might go through, there's talk that there'll be an extra 55,000 hectares coming back in. So some of us, when we look at our maps, we'll see these red-lined areas of scrub. So those areas of scrub may come back in under an eco scheme. I don't think, and I'm not sure, you know, whether that land will be available for entitlements. So we could be looking at a couple of different definitions of land. So you might have one definition for eco scheme and another definition for BIS. So we'll just have to wait and see on that one.
In fact, I know you've answered this. The Chris is paid on 30 hectares per applicant or on every set of entitlements owned or leased.
Yeah, up to that limit of 30. So if you have 10 hectares, if you have 30 hectares on your farm and you have 10 entitlements owned and 20 entitlements leased, you know, you'll get Chris on all your 30. Or even if you have no entitlements, you'll get Chris on your 30 hectares. So that's not based on entitlements. Okay,
lads, there's more questions there, but I'm going to pass on to John. Keep the questions coming in on the Q&A box at the end. So John McGuire is going to go through the new greening, as I call it, or the eco schemes, okay? Thanks, John.
Yeah, I'll just share there now, Richie. Is that coming up there now?
Perfect. You're A1, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so look, my name is John McGuire. I'm an advisor here in the Teagasc office in Munlavat. I'm just going to touch briefly on the new eco scheme from 2023 to 2027. So James alluded to it earlier that it's, I suppose you could say in essence, is replacing the greening, but in some ways it's different, but in more ways it's the same. So I suppose the first thing there to note is that it's a voluntary scheme. So it's not compulsory to go into this, or you don't have to. In theory, it replaces greening, but I suppose one thing to mention is that it's not new money. Okay, so James has kind of explained it there well, that the pot has been split up in different ways as such. The pot isn't necessarily getting any bigger. So a lot of people are thinking it's new money, a new 25% payment, but it's not new money, it's just the money being redistributed. So we look back on greening, what greening was. The greening was a percentage top up on each entitlement. So this was 44% on top of your entitlement value already. So the eco scheme is a little different in that regard, in that it's a set figure of a minimum 63 euros per hectare, or per eligible hectare. So as James said, if less people take it up, it might be more than 63, it might be closer to 73 or 75, but it'll be minimum 63. That's if everyone takes it up on every hectare. Now, I suppose another thing to differentiate between greening, you only got your greening top up on the amount of entitlements you had. Whereas where the eco scheme is different in this regard is that you do not require entitlements to receive payment under this eco scheme. So therefore, I suppose it has to be looked at as separately to entitlements in order to kind of understand it fully. So if you have 10 entitlements and 20 hectares, up until now, you've only been getting your greening top up on the 10 entitlements. But where the eco scheme is different is that if you have 10 entitlements and 20 hectares, eligible hectares, you will get the eco scheme payment on the full 20 hectares once they're eligible under the scheme. So I suppose that's a little bit different. And just to reiterate the fact that it's not compulsory, you enter if you want, you don't have to. So I suppose you've probably heard in the press about the different options and what they might be. It was originally only 5 options, but it's been expanded since up to 10 to give more flexibility for different types of farmers. You must select 2 options to fully qualify. You can select one option if you wish, but you'll only receive half rate payment. So it's completely voluntary. It's up to you what level of compliance you want to deal with. So for example, if you adopt 2 out of the 10 measures in any given year, you'll get the full rate of minimum 63 per hectare. If you only choose one option, you only get a half rate of 31 or 33 euros per hectare, whichever it'll settle at. And then similar enough, if you pick no measures or don't want to do any of the measures, you'll just get no eco payment per hectares. So again, it's a voluntary scheme. You can pick and choose different options each year. You don't have to stick to the same two for the 5 years. A common question that's coming in when people are looking at it. So you're not stuck to if you pick two, you don't have to stick to them. You can pick and choose differently each year. I suppose it's worth reiterating here as well that like these are proposed actions only. They're not set in stone. It's subject to approval, and currently I suppose the EU is looking over the actions that the Irish government have sent to them for approval. So look, there's a good direction on where it'll end up, but it's not set in stone and it's quite fluid still. So these are the 10 different options. Essentially, it's 8 options with 2 of the options with a doubling up effect. So I suppose to explain that, we look at the first option, which is the space for nature. So if you agree to devote at least 7% of your holding to biodiversity, habitats, landscape features, or I suppose you could call it non-productive areas, that will qualify you as one action for that year. Now, a question that's probably coming to your head at the minute is what is eligible for this area, or how do I know what to put into this area? I suppose it's worth noting that things already on the farm, like landscape features in regards to hedges and that, will qualify. So you'd be surprised, a lot of farms, if they have a lot of areas on the farm, will probably get to this easily enough. Every farm is always specific, but that'll depend. Now, this is where the doubling up option comes in for some people. If you choose to increase this area to at least 10% of your holding devoted to biodiversity, habitats, or landscape features, this qualifies you for 2 actions, and that will satisfy the eco scheme measure for that year. Okay, and if you say get to the 10%, your 2 actions are there, and if you want to hold that for the duration of 5 years, that's essentially your eco scheme managed. So that's the first option, your space for nature. The second option is looking at extensive livestock production. This is 1 action. So this involves a maximum stocking rate of 1.5 livestock units per hectare. I suppose for people who are thinking about the organic nitrogen per hectare, that's roughly in around 90 or 95. And there's also a minimum stocking rate of 0.15 livestock units per hectare. So those that are in the ANC, the disadvantaged scheme, will be familiar with this. And even the new active farmer is looking at that same minimum stocking rate of 0.15. So this option might be for you if you're between 0.15 livestock units per hectare or below 1.5 livestock units per hectare, and that will qualify you as one of your 2 actions. The third option is limited chemical nitrogen usage, and this is 1 action. Originally, when these first 5 came out, it was looked at as 73 kilograms of chemical nitrogen per hectare across the board, and that was it. You had to be below that in order to meet this action. But I suppose since consultation, this is now upped to reward the more moderately or intensively stocked farmers to give them an option here, and it's based on the previous year's stocking rate. So these are some examples here below that are in the proposal. They're not set in stone, they're fluid, and they're open to interpretation where they might finally settle down. But for example, if you're below 90 kilograms of organic nitrogen per hectare stocking rate, you're looking at the originally quoted figure of 73 kilos of chemical nitrogen per hectare. But say, for example, you're a higher stocked farmer above 210, then you're looking at a higher max permitted chemical nitrogen of 214 kilos of nitrogen per hectare. So that allows much more flexibility for the more marginally and intensely stocked farmers to pick that action. The fourth option then is the planting of native trees or hedgerows. So originally this was a one-pronged approach where it was just looking at native trees, but the hedgerows has been since added in, and also an extra doubling up option to give you 2 actions. So if you want to pick it, the lowest one here for 1 action, it's plant 3 trees or 1 meter of hedgerow for every eligible hectare on your application. So if you do this, that'll get you 1 action. So 3 trees for every 1 eligible hectare, or else 1 meter of hedgerow for every 1 eligible hectare. That's 1 action. If you want to double up this, you can go to plant 6 trees or 2 meters of hedge for every eligible hectare. And this will qualify you for 2 actions, which will, for the year in question that you pick these, that will do that. I suppose another question that you're probably on your mind, I'm just thinking there, if you plant the 3 trees per hectare or the 1 meter of hedgerow for every eligible hectare in 1 year, does that qualify you for the next 5? No. If you pick this each year, you're going to have to put the 3 trees each year for the 5 years. So that might answer some questions on people's mind. So that's the planting of the native trees or the hedgerows. The fifth option is the GPS controlled spreader. So this is using a GPS controlled spreader or a sprayer to spread your chemical fertilizer or liquid fertilizer or plant protection products. This might qualify as one action. So GPS controlled, although some of the feedback come back is that this is coming under scrutiny at EU level. So this, and like every other of the 10 options, it's not set in stone, and I certainly wouldn't make any decisions now based on that. The sixth option is soil sampling and liming. So this is one that probably will be very accessible to a lot of people, is that if you soil sample all your eligible hectares and spread lime where advised, if there's no lime to be spread, you're okay. And if you go a bit there, you need to spread whatever is advised. So this will qualify as one action. Now, one point to note here is that it can only be chosen once every 3 years in line with Teagasc guidance. So that option cannot be picked year after year. So that's a soil sampling and liming option. I suppose one for the more the tillage-based side of things is that the enhanced crop diversification. So this qualifies as one action. So this is planting a break crop in between your crops. So the eligible break crops will include beans, peas, oilseed rape, or oats. If you're under a 2-crop requirement, the break crop must account for a minimum 25% of the arable area. If you're under a 3-crop requirement, still the break crop must account for a minimum 25% of your arable area. So either way, if you pick this option, 25% of your arable area needs to be under the area of a break crop. And the final option is the sowing of a multi-species sward. So this will qualify as one action also. If you pick this option in the year, you need to sow at least 6% of eligible hectares in the year selected with a multi-species sward. So some of you might be familiar reading up on these already. That'll be your chicory or plantain, different types of clover, and then perennial ryegrasses. For example, if you have a 50-acre farm and you choose this option, you'd have to plant 3 acres of multi-species in that given year. If you have a 150-acre farm, you're looking at 9 acres of multi-species. So there's your 8 options with the 2 doubling ups. I suppose to summarize, you have to pick 2 options each year if you want to get the full payment. The ones like the planting of the hedges and the multi-species, if you pick them each year, you'll need to continue to plant the designated areas each year. And I suppose you can pick and choose throughout that. Each year you can pick 2 this year, 2 different ones next year, or similarly you can pick none if you want, but you get no eco payment. But look, that's it. Two ones each year, you get the full payment, and it's expected to be somewhere around 63 to 73 or 4 euros per hectare. And I suppose important as well before I finish is that you do get paid on all your eligible hectares and not just on your number of entitlements. So it's a little bit of a change from greening.
Okay, so it's all hectares. Okay, we'll bring back in all the speakers. And when the other speakers come back in, John, just how the space for nature, John, how is that calculated? You said it's 7%. So how is that calculated?
Yeah, so I suppose it's an overall percentage of your total farm area on that one, Richie. I suppose those that are in the tillage side of things probably are familiar with this already with the EFA or the ecological focus areas. So the likes of including on your map the green lines for your hedges to come up with the minimum 5%. And as Terry said there earlier, that probably most of them are closer to 7 just to be safe. But it's a similar kind of, for every meter of hedge, you get so much square meters of an allowance, and to get up to 7% of your overall area, it'll be very similar to the EFA in the tillage scenario.
Yeah, so you could easily get to the 7.
Yeah, depending on the farm, every farm is different, but some farms will get to the 10 extremely easily. Maybe some might struggle to get to the 7, depending on the farm layout. But I suppose the good thing there is you're rewarded for your features that are already there, Richie.
And just on the multi-species, just to get that clear, somebody's asking about, do I have to sow that every year, or do I sow once off and it does every year?
No. If you pick that in the year, you plant to 6% in the year you pick it, and if you want to pick it for the next year, you need to plant another 6%.
And I know Terry has a few more, but I just have one here came into here for James. Can a farmer safely lease out 100% of his entitlements in 2022 without fear of losing them?
Yeah, they can. The only thing that they need to watch is that the person that they're leasing them to draws them all down, so that they're all used. So because there's a 2-year usage rule around entitlements, so the person that's taking them from you, that they have the land to draw them all down. So that's the only, I suppose the lesser needs to be aware that they're used on the other side. But yeah, there's no problem there.
Okay, Terry, have you?
Yeah, just back to John again there on the space for nature, Richie, just on the hedges. Obviously, it's, referring to the tillage farmer that's used to their 10 meters counting per meter of hedge as a notional area, making up that 7%. Just wondering, internal hedges versus external hedges, is it 10 meters for all hedges, John, or is that only an internal hedge, and would it be less for an external hedge?
Yeah, so I suppose those in the tillage area will be familiar with this, but as far as I know, if it's an internal hedge and you have it on both sides, it gets you to more of an area. I think it's for every meter, it's 10 meters squared, where if it's a boundary hedge, you only have one side, it's a lower rate of 5 meters squared for every meter. So yeah, depending on that.
So I suppose a farm with a lot of hedges certainly could make up that 7% without having to do anything.
Yeah, like if your average field size is quite small on the 3, 4, or 5 hectares, you should get to that pretty easily. But if your average field size is up at 10 or 12 hectares, then you'll find that a lot harder to get to that.
Okay.
And Terry, just one question came in on the amendments. You said the amendments can be made up to 31st of May. Is that correct for this year? For this year's Area 8?
Yes, on this year's Area 8, up to 31st of May, amendments, and that can be changes or additional lands or removal of lands. And even to go further, that's without any penalty. And you can add on land after the 31st of May, but it is given rise to penalty of 1% per day up to the 8th of June. So let's get everything done by the 31st of May, and there will be no changes or no penalties for amendments to your Area 8. But to reiterate, the entitlements, 16th of May, end of story.
Okay, and when is the system likely to be open for putting?
Well, look, we think it could be open there maybe after the 20th of February. The system may be open there maybe in a few days before that. It's going to be launched the second half of February. So we should be making appointments from the 20th, Richie, I think.
Okay, everyone, there's a few questions there, but we said for an hour. I think we have, we're just at the hour mark now, and I'd really like to thank all the speakers, Terry, John, James, for the questions. I think we set the scene for this year, and really, for 2023, as people are completing their BPSs this year, there will be questions there as regards 2023. So in fairness, James, you said a good, and John, you set a good background to what's likely to happen. So thanks to everybody. Thanks to all those. It was a great crowd came on. Thanks to everybody that attended. And we will be back with more webinars on this subject and other subjects in the near future. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.